Hi, and how are you folks today? Good old June. I hope that you are enjoying yourself. As a brief review, we talked about the three forces, psychoanalytical. Got the next one? Behaviorism. And the next one? Humanism. All right, got them all. Good. A for today. We have discussed Freud, the psychoanalytical approach. We spent a little time on Freud. We are now visiting about the neo-Freudians, N-E-O, or new Freudian. The first individual we'll be discussing is really an individual that you don't hear a lot about, but yet some of his concepts are in our everyday lives. And this is the individual known as Alfred Adler. Now, Adler, as a child, didn't get along too well. Uh, he wasn't able to walk. I'm not really laughing at it because he didn't get along too well, but it's just kind of interesting because these theories are based on the experiences of these theorists. That is what they have based their theories upon. And so I'm going to be looking at this. And Alfred Adler was saying that we are always striving for superiority. We want to be better. We want to overcome our inferiority. Well, as a child, he was weak. He was inferior. He said, okay, we got to have goals. And some of the things that took place in his life is he was unable to walk until the age of 4. But he overcame that, and then he was able to walk. And I think this is a beautiful part about it. Alfred Adler overcame, he lived what he was talking about. He was run over by a horse and buggy twice. As a rule, people were never run over by a horse and buggy. And on an occasion, a rare occasion, possibly once, but Alfred Adler was run over a horse and buggy twice. On his way to school, he'd have to pass a graveyard, and this was a frightening experience for him. And so one day he decided, hey, I've had enough of this. I know what I'm going to be doing. And so he started walking back and forth and back and forth in front of the graveyard until he overcame this. Adler lived what he taught. And I think that's one thing that we really have to commend him for. In math, the teacher says, hey, Alfred, why don't you just give up on this? You can't do it. You cannot do math. Well, it wasn't long till after Adler accepted the challenge of what the teacher had said that he excelled in math. Wasn't only just an average student, but he excelled. Now, when we go down through here, one of the things that he felt as though that was very, very important was the fact of having a social interest. And that's what we're looking at right here, is a social interest. This is being willing to help others. And when you are willing to help others, you will receive more in return. And this is basically what Alfred Adler was looking at. Another concept that he developed was birth order. I imagine at some time or another we've all heard some about birth order, where the oldest child is the one that excels, the second child is kind of the peacemaker, and the third child is a very active, energetic child that could either go down a very negative path or a positive path. But there was one thing certain about the youngest child, is that the youngest child would receive attention. And that goes from the fact, or stems from the fact, that these children did receive attention. Being the last born, they received attention from their parents and brothers and sisters, from their siblings, aunts and uncles, and so forth, because they came along last, and so they did receive a lot of attention. So that was his concept on birth order. One of the reasons that Alfred Adler may not be known quite as well as what he should be known is that he was to put it mildly, he was a terrible writer. Where Freud was a beautiful, prolific writer, able to explain his thoughts in a very meaningful way, Adler was the opposite. Adler struggled with his writing. And so this is probably, like I stated, this is probably one of the reasons why Adler really didn't succeed in getting himself promoted as much as his actual thoughts. Now, Alfred Adler, was the head of Freud's psychoanalytical meetings, which they held every Wednesday night. And this is kind of what is interesting because Adler broke away from Freud. Adler stated, hey, that's too much sex for me. I'm breaking away from this. And when a young theorist that we will be visiting about by the name of Abraham Maslow asked Adler if he knew Freud, the usual soft-spoken Adler became very upset and denied. He didn't want anything to do with Freud. He didn't want anyone to connect his name with Freud. He didn't want anyone to realize that he was part of Freud's meetings at one time, even though he was the head. Now, one of the quotes I have here is all behavior is guided by striving for superiority. This is how we meet life's problems. Now, Freud stated just the opposite. Not superiority, but sex and aggression is what guided an individual's life. And this is kind of interesting because when we think about it, we want to succeed, we want to be superior, and I don't think being superior is necessarily negative like being better than thou. I do not believe that. But we change our style of life. In other words, we wear certain clothing, we fix our hair a certain way if you have hair, we talk a certain way, we may act a certain way, all to achieve superiority or at least be noticed. Not necessarily negative, because there's nothing wrong with being noticed. Absolutely not. You know, as long as it is done in a healthy way. And I'm not going to qualify that any further than what I've said. But we go through various actions to show our superiority and also to show our success. Adler somewhat talked about showing superiority as a negative attribute. It may not be. I mean, we have a lot of individuals that do various activities to show that they are superior. And what Adler talked about was a style of life a lot of times determines how we approach problems. And this is very true. You know, if we want to get ahead and our style of life is one of getting ahead, then we're going to approach problems in a way that will get us ahead in a way that has worked for us in previous times. Now here is a belief that Adler had, I keep saying Freud, but a belief that Adler had was men and women are equal. And I believe that this is true. This is opposite of what Freud said. Freud stated that men were a little bit better than women and that women had penis envy. Okay. Success or superiority, according to Adler, success was for the betterment of self and others, while superiority is just for self. I don't believe that that is something that is a selfish self. I believe that it can also be a very positive self. One of the aspects, or another aspect of Adler, was fictionalism, which is a goal of either success or superiority. Adler was into the aspect of setting goals, and we should attempt to strive to reach those goals, and that these goals should be reasonable and be able to be reached. An interesting aspect of Adler was that at one time when he started to treat children, He did it in front of an audience, not really realizing some of the implications and how the child may act differently in front of an audience. He went ahead and continued on with that type of treatment. Now, from Adler's viewpoint, then, social interest was very important to him. And social interest was a sign of positive mental health. So here we go. We are striving and we grow up. We are striving to overcome. We are striving to be better. This is according to Adler. So we want to put our inferiority feelings behind us and in somewhat become an unselfish, superior individual. Nothing wrong with that. Developing this, we want to set goals for ourselves. An important component that Freud brought out again was the birth order aspect, and he was very much into saying that in order to really develop self, we have to have a social interest or a betterment of our society. An example of that is the big event here on the Chadron campus and other campuses, where the students of the school will go out and help in the community, mowing lawns, painting, cleanup work, and that type of thing. But a day is set aside to do that, and it is becoming a very popular activity and a well participated in activity. So these were the concepts of Adler. Next, we will be talking about Carl Jung. So until we talk about good old Carl, we'll see you, and you have a real good day.